maybe I have to find a scientist that has a little bit longer CV than you do. How about Dolores Cahill, PhD? I'm not making this up. This is like a movie. It goes on. Look at this CV. On and on and on. Would you take her word for it, Matthew? I'm joined by Professor Dolores Cahill right now. That was pretty awesome. You have quite a background. Can you maybe in like 60 seconds give me a sense of your background? I mean, you've been very close to, there was a Human Genome Project, but you have really deciphered the proteins that are in the body. Tell me a little bit about your history, your past, and your work.
Great, thank you. Lovely to see you again, Del. Yeah, my degree is in molecular genetics. My PhD is in immunology. I was targeting drugs and toxins like ricin to try and help brain tumor patients. And then I went on to the Max Planck and I ran a group there and I invented a technology and a suite of patents to make high content protein arrays. And at that time it was quite disruptive. We had around 8,000 different human proteins and we were able to test the specificity of antibodies. And we also were able to profile the antibodies in serum for people who had autoimmune diseases and cancer and viral infections. And what was very interesting is up to that time, people would characterize against 8 proteins, and we were able to characterize against 8,000. And there's about 20,000 proteins in the human genome expressed, and so I made these high content arrays. And at the time, we were then able to take published antibodies from research publications and diagnostic labs and look at the specificity and cross-reactivity of antibodies. And I also worked on a meningitis vaccine, and I worked in a class 2-3 safety lab, and then I ran that lab for about 3 years. And the last thing is to say that because of high-content protein arrays, we're able to look at the specificity and cross-reactivity of antibodies, but at one amino acid level, so that you can actually do epitope mapping. And we were also able to profile if a person naturally cleared a virus or a bacteria like meningitis, exactly what were the proteins, the antibodies against what proteins that made them, we'll say in meningitis, not die, and then take those proteins and epitope map the antibody to the amino acid level. And I developed a company, Protogen, as you know, in 1997, co-founded it. And we were kind of quite world leaders at the time to make diagnostic assays. And also we looked at companion diagnostics for why did people respond to certain drugs and not, and also to profile people who had adverse events. So including unusual symptoms like chronic fatigue.
All right. I'm sure you could go on and on and on, but I don't want to do, I want to admit to Matthew McConaughey, I only understood about half of that stuff too. So we're together on that. But so I think what we can glean from this is that you understand viruses at a very, profoundly microscopic level. You've been watching this COVID-19. I have a lot of questions for you. But I wanted to start the discussion with masks. Russell Blaylock is a world-renowned doctor who's come out and said there is a danger to wearing these things. Do you agree with him? What are your thinking when you look at disease profiles and viruses and bacteria? Are masks effective at keeping us healthy?
So I would say it's the third slide there. There's a table that just compares coronaviruses with Ebola viruses. So if it was an Ebola virus outbreak, then a mask would be affected because Ebola virus is transmitted through the air. But in the case of coronavirus, it's not transmitted through the air. It's transmitted through droplets that then would drop on a surface like a door handle. So in coronavirus, there is absolutely no need to wear a mask. And also that means there's no necessity for coronaviruses. But also I entirely agree with Professor Blaylock, who has an outstanding track record and is very experienced in this area, that because the mask is covering you, you have less oxygen, and that puts your immune system under stress. And then the latent viruses that are in your body, because you're under immune stress, will reappear. And not only will you have more coronavirus, but if you had other latent viruses, it would allow them to re-emerge. And the reason why they re-emerge is that nutrition and vitamins and stress are very important to have good nutrition, have very little stress on the body, and ensure that you have vitamins to keep your immune system working. And in this case, in coronavirus, the immune system can clear the virus within, 10 or 11 days. So I would definitively say for coronavirus, there is no need for masks, and also there is no need for social distancing. So I'm actually looking in Ireland to see whether we can take precedence cases against, legally, because the government scientists, and our Taoiseach is a doctor, and the Minister for Health, that they are making policy decisions that actually will make people sicker. So there is no need to wear masks. And also, as your earlier commentary, that there will be more deaths, that in the United Kingdom, for example, normally there are 5,000 people diagnosed with cancer in a month, and there's only 25,000. So there are issues around heart attacks being not treated properly, early diagnosis of cancer, and also issues around depression. So I am saying that in Ireland, any deaths that result, we'll say, from 10 days' time are entirely unnecessary. And we will be counting those deaths and holding our Prime Minister and Minister for Health personally to account, because I think it's verging on almost a crime against humanity. There are deaths, hundreds of deaths will happen because of the policies that they're doing, keeping people in their homes where they should be informed, good nutrition, vitamins, and people who have no underlying conditions and are under 70 should engage in the next 10 days and interact with society to build up the herd immunity and go back to work. And I would be saying that any closure really in Ireland after the 25th of May is unnecessary. And I would even consider, the same in America, and that perhaps people should consider actually going about their daily lives on the 25th of May, because it is entirely unnecessary what's going on. And I do have one slide there with the 3 outbreaks from the CDC. It was the second slide, if they want to put it up. And
Great.
So the second slide, this is actually from the director of the CDC, and it was presented at a US presidential meeting. And this clearly shows it ranges from December 2019 to the 12th of April 2020. That when viruses circulate the globe, they actually circulate the globe within about 3 or 4 to 6 weeks. And that this flu season, as normal, influenza B circulated influenza A and COVID-19. So what happens then as well is that everybody in the globe are exposed to these viruses, and people, the majority of people will not have any symptoms, and they will develop an immune response and clear it, and then a certain percentage of the population will have flu-like symptoms. And I am saying that only about 1 in 100 people will go on to develop a cough. And because we now are totally aware that the drug hydroxychloroquine with AZT and zinc can actually prevent those people from ever reaching hospital, that there is actually, a well-known prevention and a treatment. And because we have that, it's then entirely unnecessary to have these lockdowns. And I am happy to join the other scientists in the world to call it out. But I do think there has to be legal consequences for the deaths after, we'll say, the 25th of May, for politicians and scientists advising them. And they also have to really join in each of our countries with the scientists. There has to be debates on national broadcasting TV for the scientists who think like I do, to actually hold, the ministers have to say what scientists specifically are saying that the lockdown is necessary, masks are necessary. I have some slides there and sent you on the publications associated with them. So essentially, I'm saying in all countries.
Uh-oh. Why don't you try and get her back, and let me go over. Can we bring up that slide? I want to bring up the slide where she was showing, because I think it's really important. We'll see if we can get her back online. We got her back? All right, great. So Dolores, you've covered so many things in what you just went through there that have all been questions and issues we've been dealing with, here on the show. I, too, agree with you that I would like to know, I would really like to have the people step forward and stand forward and say, who among you are behind the lockdown, the use of masks, those of you that are saying hydroxychloroquine doesn't work, and that this is a deadly epidemic that warrants a quarantine? I would like to see all those people stand next to each other so we know who will be responsible. And really, it seems to me that the body of science is now saying many of the things that you are. Let me just take it back, though, a minute, because you were in Ireland, which is, pretty close to the UK, so you were much closer to the imperial model than I was. But from all the way over here, it wasn't making a lot of sense from the beginning. And now we know, we have coders and people that are looking at this model saying it is one of the worst pieces of, stinking disaster there ever was, and the whole world followed it. Could you tell right away? Was it hard to understand? Should scientists have been as hoodwinked by the imperial model as they were? When did you start recognizing something stinks here?
So I would say I was in touch with some doctors that were trying to impress the importance of hydroxychloroquine in February of 2020, who were already concerned at that stage. So what I would say is that there is absolutely no need to be looking at models in these cases, because we have such information and actual data around the world for when the viruses actually circulate the globe and where they are in different countries. And also, since the first COVID-1 in 2003, there's thousands of publications for how that circulated the globe, and that people actually clear the antibody after that. And there were 2 more circulations. So what I'm saying, which is well recognized in this virus, that once you have recovered from this virus, you are immune for life. And by the way,
you, Dolores, you've recovered yourself. Am I correct in that you got COVID-19? How was it? Was it like Cuomo? Were you like hallucinating and talking to your dead father as he described it? I don't know if you saw that, but our CNN anchor here was saying it was awful.
Yeah, so I would have had pneumonia, was like, twice in my life, 20 years ago. So it was nothing like that. So I had flu. My husband actually flew to America in December and January, and he came back with it, and then I got it. And I had flu-like symptoms for about 2 weeks. And then I started to get this maybe a week, and then a dry cough that went on for about 2 weeks. And towards the end, I was breathless. So I was worried a little bit for a few days, and then it went away. And I, of course, did not know what it was, but that was January and February. So that I then found out, because of the dry cough, that was the symptoms. But if we had known, which we could have, because it was in China, the way to boost the immune system for everybody is to have good nutrition, reduce stress, and take vitamins D and vitamin C and zinc. And then most people, the vast majority, 99 out of 100, will have no symptoms at all. And what the media should have been doing worldwide before the virus came is to publicize the symptoms, right? First of all, publicize the prevention with vitamin D, C, and zinc, and then the symptoms, so that people could have taken those in January and February. And then, if they could have said the symptoms, and then if they said, if you have a cough, you can take hydroxychloroquine, AZT, and zinc. And because it was known in China very early in January and February that 50% of people in the world that were dying were over 80. Hydroxychloroquine has a half-life of 21 days, and you could have given the cystic fibrosis or underlying condition a preventative tablet of hydroxychloroquine every 2 weeks, and then even then they would not have, and zinc, of course, and they would not have any symptoms. So we do not need anyone to die for this. So if you just put up the table again between Corona and Ebola, what I just wanted to do is to say, because I worked in one of these biosafety labs and I ran one, that Ebola is considered class 4, biosafety class 4, and the reason for that is that there is no treatment. We still don't have a vaccine. So Ebola was discovered first in 1976, and there is not a vaccine. And of course, it's not that they haven't worked on a vaccine, they just haven't a vaccine that's safe. So the reason why I think that this SARS-CoV-2 should now be down to safety class 1, which means you don't require any social distancing, is because we now know we have a preventative strategy and we have a treatment. So the difference between
we're getting a different story here, Dolores. I mean, here, I mean, I know you're singing the praises of hydroxychloroquine. We have seen the studies all over, China, and they've been done in Italy. Of course, the great work by Dr. Didier Raoult. But here in America, we've got Tony Fauci saying, it really doesn't look very promising. And we have governors that are saying, I am going to restrict the use of hydroxychloroquine and, for only emergency use, like right at the point where someone might be going on a respirator. What do you have to say about that policy that is, at least through most of America? And when we're hearing Matthew McConaughey saying this shouldn't be political, I feel like hydroxychloroquine got really political here in America. As soon as Trump said this looks really promising, CNN, MSNBC, NBC, all of these networks that seem to have a liberal bend just came out against it. You really believe this strongly that hydroxychloroquine could be considered treatment to the point where we drop it from a level 4 virus, which means no treatment, very deadly, down to a level 1? Can you explain that? What are we doing here in America?
So what I think, there has been now, first of all, people should be aware that hydroxychloroquine has been used in malaria for over 60 years, and it's been used as treatment for arthritis and lupus for 20 years, and also for people with HIV. So there was one very interesting study that hasn't really got much attention, that 68,000 people that were on, and generally elderly, were on hydroxychloroquine for arthritis. That out of 68,000, only 4 of these elderly people ended up in hospital. So they were taking, this is during this outbreak. So that's just an example of how hydroxychloroquine can be very safe and it's well used. So what I would put a different slant on it. I would say to people, like I have a mum who's 94 years old, and if people are elderly themselves, that there is a treatment. So essentially the governments and the media are not informing people that there is a way for them to prevent getting flu-like symptoms. But also there is a legal and ethical and moral responsibility. If I was 80 and I was listening to me and saying, well, there is an option that I just have to take a very safe treatment, that I can go re-engage in the world and I don't have to worry about getting these flu symptoms, that I am saying that we have to hold individual people like our Taoiseach. I am holding Leo Varadkar to account, and our ministers for health. And they have to push forward on the main news stations who is the scientist that's making those decisions. And when I ran the biosafety lab in Berlin, if anybody died because in my lab, I would be responsible. And even if I did not make a mistake. And the fine was around €250,000 at the time. And that was, 15 years ago. So that's an example of how scientists can be held to account. So I think what it is that people whose parents die, in June, or if, family members, that really those deaths are unnecessary. So the media is not saying there's prevention. They're not saying that there's a treatment. So therefore, and I do fear as well, that they are almost hoping that there will be a spike in the second wave. And that spike in deaths could actually be patients who have undiagnosed cancers or an increase in cardiovascular disease. So what we have to say is the policy is entirely wrong, and I am happy to debate in America or Ireland or anywhere with people. There is no need for social distancing. There is no need for masks. Once people know nutrition, vitamins, and hydroxychloroquine can prevent it and treatment, that actually the whole world should be opening up on the 25th of May, 2020. And also, we should never do this again, because once you clear the virus, you will be immune for life. So there is no need. We'd be better to open up now as well, because the virus is circulating in the wintertime. And there is no need to have a second wave. And I would say that we need to end the lockdown and then never again, right? It was an entirely mistake, and it should never be done. And I think individual scientists should come out and publish the papers at a US presidential thing, the basis for all this. So there was no need for the models, right? We have enough data. There's no need for masks, distancing. We have to stop it right now.
It seems to me, Dolores, there are so many scientists across the world that are saying the exact same thing. When I hear people like Matthew McConaughey, I'm beating on him a little bit. He doesn't know better. He's an actor. He's not a scientist. But when he says, you know, we have a common enemy, we're in a war against a virus, it seems to me the war that's going on in this world right now is against herd immunity. It's really a war against nature and how we've survived since the dawn of man. We have this beautiful pattern, which is so beautifully shown in the graphs you're showing.
Absolutely.
You see the flu in 2017 that lasted the same amount of time. We see, you know, we even know that MERS and SARS had the same cycle. This idea, you're hearing that the COVID-19 could be here forever, for 30 years. That defies all the science we know about every other coronavirus before it. It's as though they keep moving the goalposts. It's just like whatever anecdotal thought they can come up with to scare us some more. This is going to be the first coronavirus that, you know, lasts a lifetime. Or this is the first coronavirus where maybe you don't get immunity after you've had it. We're going to have the first virus ever that acts totally differently than any other virus we've seen through the history of mankind. And perhaps I think one of the biggest stories, I want to know if you have any thoughts on this. You know, we've been hearing, in fact, do we have the video where we hear everybody talk about how children were safe? We've been hearing that children are safe. Take a look at this, Dolores.
One of the merciful things about the coronavirus pandemic is that the disease does not seem to badly affect children.
Kids seem to be relatively unaffected.
Children are more mildly affected.
The virus poses a low risk for kids.
Millennials, Generation C, Generation X that are out and about. These are the individuals that we know have the least symptoms.
Kids have immune systems that can rapidly adapt and change. So if they get the coronavirus, it can fight it.
Kids who have been found to be infected seem to be having mild illness, if any illness at all related to the infection.
I mean, every scientist around the world has been saying this doesn't affect children. It's really the elderly. We know this for a fact. But then all of a sudden this week, as though, you know, we're losing political ground. People are coming out into the sunshine. They're starting to just defy the orders of lockdown, saying this seems ridiculous. I'm seeing the science around the world. I'm seeing scientists saying we need herd immunity. Now all of a sudden this brand new story came out. This one was NBC saying multiple children in Massachusetts are sickened by deadly coronavirus-related illness. It's occurring about 6 weeks after a child may have been exposed to COVID-19 infection, he said. And, you know, it is just randomly happening. 82 New York City kids diagnosed with mystery illness related to COVID-19. That's a very strong statement. The link between COVID-19 and this syndrome has not been confirmed. It has been confirmed, yet look at that headline. Look at this. It says not confirmed, but it says related to COVID-19. I mean, they're clearly going out of the way to scare people. If you read these articles deeper, it's saying that Kawasaki's disease, which can happen from a virus, there's multiple reasons why a child can get this. There were even articles that said that, well, though Kawasaki's, you know, was seen in children after they'd had COVID-19, that several of the children didn't test positive. And we're talking about like a handful of children around the world right now. Is this a scare tactic?
Absolutely.
Well, right here.
So absolutely, yeah. There has been papers indeed for Kawasaki, maybe one or two cases, but I think what we have to do is, you know, judge risk, right? So say if the risk of the coronavirus is equivalent to the risk of people driving in America, right? So that if everyone doesn't drive, there will be the equivalent less deaths. But what we have to do in Ireland and ordinary people or in the world is they manage risk every day. So that, you know, people do drive to work every day and they do recognize there is a very small risk. So I think why we have to hold personally the owners of the media stations personally responsible and the politicians and the health officials is that what they are doing is hyping up the fear so that to try and give a rationale for a policy that has no scientific immunological basis, and more people will be sick and more people will die because of their policy decisions. So I think we will actually globally, and I've been in touch with some scientists and lawyers worldwide, that we actually need to set up legal tribunals in countries for crimes against humanity, specifically for the heads of those countries. And also I would be calling between today and May 25th for the presidents of those countries to name the individuals who are taking these decisions, and will put them on notice that there has to be a mechanism to hold them, and they should actually, because if you are involved, especially as a medical profession and doctors, you have a duty to say that they cannot do more harm than good. And I am saying, as are the other scientists, that their policy decisions, their personal decisions by the prime ministers and presidents of these countries, that they are negligent in their duties if they did not take in the opposite voices and have televised debates on the radio stations and TV stations in the country, and that otherwise we will count the deaths after the 25th of May. I would be saying that is reopening the World Day. And I think what's particularly tragic is that they are attacking people. You know, if you work in a government job like I do and have a pension, I'm still getting my salary. But if you own a small business or a restaurant or a hotel or a taxi driver, you really don't have enough money. So the health and economic consequences of the lockdown are multiples, and the destruction of people's health and immune systems are probably 10 to 20 times. So those individual people will have to be held to account, and they should actually go to prison because they are resulting in unnecessary deaths within the various societies. So I would be saying that this is now being a crime against humanity, and I am holding Leo Varadkar to account, the Prime Minister of Ireland, and I would be very happy. If I am wrong, he can put all of his teams against me in a TV program in RTE for an hour, and if I am wrong, I will take them all on together. Then he can carry on with the lockdown. But if not, I would be saying that he should be personally sued and he should lose his salary and his pension. And as a doctor, he has an even greater responsibility to not harm people. So that's, I think we just need to.
All right. I'm going to start saying it now because it means something. Dolores, those are fantastic ideas, and it's true. Someone needs to be held accountable. We can't, I mean, if you watch Tony Fauci, the guy has said every possible scenario at some point. Don't wear a mask, it's totally pointless. Do wear a mask, you know, it's going to protect you. This thing isn't really deadly. Oh, it's totally deadly. Oh, it's just like the flu. Oh, it's going to kill millions. I mean, it's like if you say enough things, he's got it covered. He can say, oh, I said that, amongst the other million things that totally went against that. But Dolores, I want to thank you for taking the time. I know it's risky what you're saying right now.
Can I just say one more thing, Del?
Go
ahead.
If
it's okay, can I drop one little thing? I think that I have looked into these issues over about 10 years, and I think there needs to be a global community where people who are assessing vaccine safety have no conflicts of interest. Yes. And, you know, say I could be involved in a vaccine, but it was entirely for Africa and I did not benefit from it, and we didn't, and that you would sign that you and your family would not benefit from any vaccines. So I would say people like, you know, Dr. Sherry Tenpelly, Dr. Judy Mikovits, Professor Blaylock, so people who guarantee for their lifetimes they will not have any conflicts of interest in a vaccine, in any financial way, no benefit, that there should be a separate regional or global institute for vaccine safety. And I'd be very happy to be involved in that. And all of the results of the trials should be available, and all of the adverse events, and there needs to be a tracking system, post-marketing surveillance, to actually track in countries what the adverse events are, because often they are 6 months or 9 months after, and if they are in autoimmune diseases, they could be dependent, or chronic fatigue, on the genetic makeup of individuals. So if they're not tracked systematically after a particular vaccination, then it's very difficult to decide the symptoms. So I would just say,
let me just right there. Hold on, because you brought up, you decided to ask more, so I have another question for you. When you start hearing this idea that they want to give this vaccine to everyone in the world, they're racing to, hopefully, they're now saying maybe by the end of the year. When you think of a vaccine that's going to have as little safety, we know there's no placebo trials going on against a saline placebo, maybe some other, you know, adjuvanted vaccines or things, but we don't have a safety profile that will be established. Is it not terrifying to think, what good is a surveillance system to see that this vaccine actually causes severe autoimmune diseases if we've all already got it in us? What could this do to our species?
So on an interview about a few days ago, I said that I would personally take a legal case, and I'm very grateful that a lot of barristers and solicitors have now contacted me, and organizations in this space, because in our country we have a constitutional and inalienable right to body integrity. But I think the issue with these coronaviruses, what people need to be aware, is that this coronavirus has been around since 2003, and there are no licensed vaccines, right? But it's not that they have previously done a huge amount of work to develop a vaccine, but the reason why there is no vaccine on the schedule in America, or there's none available, is that in the studies, when they vaccinated the animal models, that when those animal models, exactly, I sent you the paper, came across again a coronavirus subsequently. They had a cytokine storm. So this happened, we'll say, in RSV for children, and two of the children died, the initial ones. But also, it is emerging that that could have been a major issue in why so many people died in Wuhan and in Lombardy, because no one is saying, why weren't there more deaths across China or in other regions? And there was actually vaccine administered, and it shows that the US Army actually published a paper that in the influenza vaccine, that if coronaviruses were there, and that they actually, when the soldiers then came across a coronavirus, they had much more significant adverse events. So the danger for humanity is that there has been no corona vaccine in 17 years because, exactly as you say, if all of a population get it, it's only when the coronavirus comes along circulating the globe in 3 or 4 years, there could be hundreds of thousands of deaths. And so the reason why I started to speak out was that in Ireland, the Irish Medicines Organisation did a press release on the 5th of May 2020 that they are going to engage in mandatory vaccinations for the whole country. And I will not take that vaccine, and I will take a legal case. And I've also offered to volunteer for parents or anyone in their employment who are adversely affected because of this flu vaccination. So I think.
So let me ask you. I read that article. I read the article
if you challenge
on the flu.
them, sometimes.
Let me ask you a question. On the flu vaccine, my understanding was that there was viral interference. My understanding of that being that it was just your body was taught to just look at the flu, but you kind of let coronavirus go by. But I've heard one of the big pandemic has been a big discussion this week. Judy Mikovits said there's actually coronavirus in the flu shot. Do you agree with that perspective? And does that then mean that what we're seeing may not, are you saying that it may not be viral interference, but what we're actually seeing is this antibody immune enhancement that was happening in the vaccines, that if there's a little coronavirus in the flu, then when we come in contact with it, it gives us a more serious reaction, which Tony Fauci keeps warning us is a possibility of the vaccine? Did I hear you right? Are you agreeing with Judy that coronavirus is in the vaccine?
I agree entirely with Judy, and you don't need to put it up now, but there was a second slide associated with the paper around the SARS, that what happens is that these vaccines are made sometimes on monkey kidneys, or on different cell lines. And as we know, coronaviruses are actually, they are actually coronaviruses associated with different animals. So if they use a tissue to make the influenza vaccine, and that tissue comes from a dog or from a monkey, and that they intrinsically have coronaviruses, when you're making a virus, you actually often homogenize the tissue, the underlying fetal cell line or the underlying dog tissue or the underlying kidney from a monkey. And so all of the latent viruses that those animals have are then included in the flu that has then been injected into people. And so then they become exposed. So why there is no corona vaccine after 17 years is that when they injected those the vaccines containing those type of material, all of the animals would die, or if it was in babies or in soldiers, that they would have this really adverse immune reaction, which then would have to be treated. So that's why in Ireland we cannot have a mandatory vaccination, because essentially we are experimenting on the world. But I think what's also important to say is the coronavirus has circulated the world within 6 weeks. It's gone. And the way this virus does is you clear it, right? The PCR test would be negative, but your antibody test would be positive. So there is no latent disease. And what those people are not cases like me. We are immune for life. And if we come across that exact virus again, we won't have symptoms. Of course, if it mutates, then some people will have, depending on the mutation. So this is entirely unnecessary what they're doing, and we just have to call it out. And I'm very happy to be given the opportunity, Del.
Dolores, that was incredible information and a new look into, we've discussed the flu shot, and I think about right now huge discussions in the Australian football leagues where they're trying to force many of those athletes to get a flu shot, saying you don't want to get the flu and the coronavirus at the same time. But what you're saying is something I've been worried about, but on a deeper level. if there's coronavirus in those flu vaccines, you could be putting those athletes and anybody, when I hear doctors here say, well, you should at least get your flu shot, the idea that we might be putting people in grave danger by doing that is spectacular.
And if you just want to do the last slide, there's a lot of text in one of the slides on the SARS paper. And at the end, if you want to put it up, it's a lot of text, the end of a paper. But the last sentence is, because of these results, we have to really consider whether we should be making corona-type viruses. So you don't have to put it up, but this was a 2012 paper that I sent you on. You can put it up on your website. So because of the results, that it really, so I think that it's an experiment and that we should say no. And scientists like me who study, immunology, we have to speak up because otherwise there could be significant unnecessary deaths.
Absolutely. I've seen that. We've seen the science. It is so great to have you on. Continue your great work. You are obviously, we always try to say to people, be brave. Dolores, amazing. Great to know you're out there. Luckily, you are surrounded by, I would say, the body of the most intelligent scientists in the world are agreeing with you. Thank you for bringing so much clarity to us today.
Thank you.
All right. You take
Thank
care.
you for having me, Dale. Take care. Bye-bye.
You bet. Absolutely. Right? Mind-blowing.